Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I'm really glad you're here. I presume that you're here as part of a team, maybe a committee or a leader who's ready to replace your aging environmental health software. And we like to joke, does your system look like it was designed back in the 90s on Windows 95 or maybe even worse? Maybe your software provider is struggling, maybe their stock price is in the gutter, or maybe they've overpromised, overallocated. Maybe they're not long for this world. If any of these are your situation, or you think it might be your situation one day, then you're in the right place. Let's begin. I am Daryl Booth. I'm really lucky to have worked with environmental health departments and hazmat regulators for over 25 years. That's large and small agencies from Los Angeles County in California to state of New Hampshire and New England. I'm a technical advisor to the National Environmental Health Association, and I'm fortunate to have a column in the Journal of Environmental Health, which is titled Building Capacity. It's been my personal and professional pleasure to write for the journal, so I've had a lot of fun. I serve today as the General Manager for Environmental Health here at Excella, which means I have some level of involvement in most of Excella's environmental health data management projects. I am lucky, we are lucky to have with us here today my good friend and colleague, Amber D'Ottavio. Amber also has 20 plus years of experience. Initially, I learned for nonprofits, specifically working towards self-sufficiency for persons experiencing homelessness, low income, and certain disabilities. And I didn't know that about you, Amber, before we prepared this slide. And now Amber is working for you all in GovTech, which just means software that's designed for local and state governments. Amber today serves as Excella's Vice President for Product Management, which means that she establishes our product roadmap and product features and a lot more. She's literally the most impacted schedule I've ever seen. I mean, she's just very, very busy, but I'm very glad you're here today, Amber. Thank you. Before we begin, Amber and I want to be able to speak to your situation specifically. And so you'll see popped up on your screen the first of two poll questions. So Jill's opened this first one. If you could just take a moment, review the question, pop in an answer, we'll share the results with you. If it's not convenient for you to see, it says, why are you attending today? Select the option that describes your situation the best. And you've got the current situation doesn't meet our current solution doesn't meet our needs. We're thinking about replacing our current solution, or we have no plans to make changes, but we're just here. And if you need to grab the corner, you can expand that dialogue and read all the text. Just a couple more folks. If you haven't put in a response, please take a click and put one in there. Okay, that's probably pretty good, Jill. So it looks like we're thinking about replacing our current system. We need to know what alternates are out there. That's pretty common. So I have a second poll question. Jill, if you're able to put up that second poll question, that would be great. The second poll question, if it's not convenient for you to read, it says, what are you looking for in the future, your new environmental health software? And I think you can select multiple. So improve employee productivity, provide better solutions for inspectors, automate those laborious business processes, set yourself up for future viability and avoid disruption. And then there's the, I'm forced to being changed. I may as well learn what else is out there, which we see sometimes too. All right, I'm going to give it just a couple more clicks. Good, we ended the poll. And you can see the results. We're going to have additional comments and questions through the Q&A tab. We're not monitoring chat. I'm not even sure if that option is turned on for you all, so please use the Q&A button as we proceed. So let's begin. Amber and I we asked to be here. We made a similar presentation last spring, and we feel like all the points we made last spring have even amplified since then. The trends continue to strengthen towards consolidation, meaning software companies and software solutions are consolidating and settling out. That's what happens when a market gets kind of oversaturated. And what I mean by that is that smaller, maybe underdeveloped companies which are struggling or they could be bought out. In some cases, that's their objective, to be bought out by a bigger company. But all these things are going on, and in many ways, they're out of the control of environmental health departments. Said plainly, we think the timing is right to help one another a little bit. We both have a job to do. You may be researching your next software system. We want to put our best foot forward and have very successful projects. We want to convey to you some insider information related to researching your next environmental health software solution. And I think, Amber, you might be able to explain better. So, Amber, let me ask you to explain it. Why are we making this presentation now?
Sure. Well, in the last 5 years, we can cite massive changes to the environmental health software commercial environment. Some easy examples would be Tyler Technologies bought Digital Health Department, and now they're shutting it down. So all of those DHD customers are being asked to move to Energov, which is a product that they're actively building out for environmental health. Digital Health Department customers are now in a spot where they need to pick their next data system. HealthSpace is another example. They completely renamed themselves last summer, and we're really not sure why. So I guess I would say that when you do your research, you may have a proposal from HS GovTech, but include the former business names HealthSpace and Garrison Enterprise in your research. Some of these companies might find themselves in financial stress, perhaps with future mergers on the horizon. So it really pays to do your research. Also, city and county environmental health departments are expected to be more integrated with the other departments in their local governments. So our analysis indicates that these are the primary reasons for a high volume of new environmental health data projects.
You're right, of course, Amber. And so we're here to speak with you as leaders within your organizations. You're probably here because your team is being asked to consider the next software system. We appreciate you for what you're doing. We know it's tough. We know the pressure is high. We intend today to make your job just a little bit easier with these ideas. So, Amber, let's begin. Would you mind introducing our first tip?
Sure. If your current software system is working okay for you, we tend to call that your daily driver. Now, your daily driver gets you where you need to go. When it acts up, you know exactly what to do because you've been together so long. But just because your aging system is ready to be replaced does not mean that you can or should recreate it with the new system. So let me say that again. Don't try to recreate what you're replacing.
That's right. And I feel that almost every day. We know it can be difficult. You want to look for something familiar. That's after all your basis for reference. But maybe think about it this way. If the driver of a 2005 Toyota Corolla is ready for the next car, after all, that good old Corolla's got more than 200,000 miles on it. It rattles pretty good going down the road. In that situation, the driver wouldn't try to find exactly what they had. Nearly 2 decades have passed and car technology has changed a lot. So we would expect now more efficiency, more safety, more fun. We have sensors to warn us when we're about to change lanes. So don't specify a 95 Corolla, specify a modern vehicle. A modern vehicle has safety features, conveniences. If you're investing in a change, after all, this is an investment on your part, not just financial, but organizationally and in terms of your political capital. You should also be investing in modern capabilities like automated emails, text messages, dashboards, GIS integration, apps across all platforms. So restated, our first tip is don't try to specify the behaviors of your legacy system in the requirements of the new system. To confirm this, you should be looking at your requirements for your next system and look for any references to the old system. If you're referring to the old system in your new requirements, calling things by what the prior vendor called things, then you're still tied to it as a legacy. So this is tip number 1, only define modern requirements. Now, we won't assume that our entire audience is in tune with what cloud first and all that means. So I'm going to start with just a base code. There are 2 related terms, cloud and software as a service, or sometimes that is SaaS, capital S, lower a, capital S, software as a service. Back when you licensed software in the 2000s, or maybe even earlier, you almost always had to buy servers, or your IT department did, They had to set up the operating system, databases, all that to make it work. And your IT staff was typically responsible for securing, upgrading, backups, testing, optimizing, all that to keep it running. When you license software now in the 2020s, businesses and governments will save those resources, time, and stress if they license access to the software that's already running out on servers that are already under management on a scale so much larger than your city or county or district could do on their own. So when we suggest cloud first as a strategy, we're encouraging you to select a solution that's in tune with modern software delivery. And the nice thing is your IT stakeholders, they won't have to be convinced of this. That is, your IT department probably is already adopting Office 365 and other cloud-based solutions for you. It's really super convenient.
So why SaaS? Why cloud? Well, number one, it's a quick start. It's access to your system within hours. It's not weeks or months. And number two, when you have a cloud first strategy, you're already wired to connect with other cloud systems, such as Microsoft Power BI and Esri's ArcGIS for analyzing your data, or with payment processors, or with county property records, or with Yelp, or any web front ends where your operators can self-serve. You're connected with the cloud. But I want to warn you, just because you use the internet to access your software does not make it cloud or software as a service. You need to do your research. For example, if your software vendor is offering you a direct connection to your production transaction database, they're not doing you any favors. They aren't secure. There are secure ways to mirror that database for local reporting, but direct access to the production data is not good. It's really a red flag. True SaaS vendors should have operations and policies that involve physical, application, network, and data level security, as well as backup and disaster recovery. SaaS vendors should conform with the top enterprise security certifications like PCI and HIPAA, with strong security policies and auditing programs. So as an example, Microsoft Azure has extensive certifications, and they conduct audits every year. Now, fake SaaS platforms will say that they take care of your security, but they won't have these certifications or be audited by anyone for their policies. SaaS also addresses version upgrades and refresh cycles that agencies are challenged with today. Technology is just evolving faster than ever. Cycles for version upgrades, updates, and security patches are getting shorter and shorter, and it's nearly impossible for some agencies to keep up. And with the talent required to support these cycles, they're hard to find, afford, and retain, resulting in a mountain of technical debt. So in the cloud, you'll never have to worry about this stuff. You'll never have to worry about an upgrade, which really allows you to do what you do best, which is protect the public's health. And let others do what they do best, like backups and software updates and security. Moving to a cloud-based system with automated capabilities allows employees to spend less time on that maintenance and more time on innovation, which also leads to happier employees. So it's really a win-win. Because employee burnout rates have been steadily increasing throughout the pandemic, organizations should take advantage of where they can eliminate any pain points within their internal processes, and cloud software gives you those options.
That's great. And I happen to know from other meetings, Amber, that you and your team just announced a new capability. It's the ability to like automatically deploy an environment where customers can look at their software before the update is applied and not disrupt their test environment, not disrupt their training environment, but still have ample time to take a look at it. So that's really cool. To finish out this thought, of course, cloud software is really the only option that makes sense in 2022. So to confirm this, require that your system installs 0 files on your computer. Really, only a modern browser should be needed. And this is tip number 2. Consider a cloud-first strategy. Now, in our experience, my experience, environmental health departments don't often automate coordination between other departments within their county or their cities. Health districts are another dynamic completely. I can appreciate that if you're in a county with 20 cities or more, coordinating digitally with all 20 cities and all of their individual vendors would require a lot of energy and leadership. That's true. But in cases where you're part of a county and the county has the primary responsibility for, as an example, new residential projects, which will obviously require environmental health to sign off on a septic and a drinking water well, there are huge opportunities here. For example, how many of us work within a county health department that has responsibility for approving septic and water well and residential projects? Most likely it's all of us. So how many of you log into one system and then switch over and log into the other system in order to add your approvals and notes? And worse, maybe even rely on paper or a permit application to be emailed back and forth to inform the building department of your approvals. This is an example where, with your leadership, you should expect that county environmental health and building department work together from a single source of truth. And that means that projects that initiate in building appear in environmental health, and environmental health approvals are automatically sent to the building department. I have a term for you to learn today. API stands for Application Programming Interface, API. And an application programming interface means that your next system is built expecting to connect to other systems. Why? It's because this is like a receptacle and a plug. It's the proper way and the secure way to interconnect systems. And a modern data system, a modern replacement system for your environmental health tracking software will have this. This is the gateway to all sorts of creative extensions. Here I brought a great example. The County of Ventura in California is responsible for a backflow prevention program, backflow prevention device testing primarily. They monitor 17,000 devices. Thankfully, third parties do all the testing, but the department's responsible for seeing that the test is done and letters and reminders are sent out from environmental health. We know from other health departments that the least efficient way of doing this is to have your testers email, fax, or mail. I remember an anecdote where a fax machine, I guess this was back in the day, felt like it was burning 24/7, spitting out these test results, and an FTE was responsible for transcribing them, in this case, into Envision Connect. That's just too much to do. The better way, the way in which Ventura County and their IT department, I think, showed real leadership, is that they just developed their own app. It's an easy way for testers to scan the tag on the device. It's a barcode or a QR code. They enter the testing event, and then they move straight to their next stop. In fact, County of Ventura has been really busy. They also have a Safe Beaches app and a Safe Diner app. They accomplish these things using an application programming interface or an API to excel on. And Ventura County isn't the only example of breaking through this walls of a silo. There are many. Other examples would include GIS, which touches so many use cases, flow through to citywide or countywide accounting systems, your enterprise accounting systems, validating professional licenses where that might apply, for example, with the state. And now I think is your moment to break through that silo, through that practice of working alone. There's no reason you should have to exit your screen and log into another system just to finish your work. So to confirm this, require that your new solution include a documented, public-facing, secure API. Specify the workflows and data that flow beyond your walls. Make that really clear. And this is our tip number 3. Look outward and beyond silos.
Now, this next tip has less to do with researching and selecting the right system and more to do with your overall project success. Many requests for proposals ask the question, can you estimate how much staff time it will be required to implement and configure the proposed system? Well, that's a good start, but it's really difficult for proposers to answer. Proposers don't know your staff. Proposers don't know the skill sets or any of their other obligations.
That's right. We recently launched a project where the environmental health department, I thought, showed a lot of pragmatism and wisdom on this point. Tacoma, which is in Pierce County, Washington, they managed their project such that funding for the software and implementation was budgeted, and there was no problem there. The project was just about ready to kick off, but no, leadership stepped in. Where Pierce County saw a gap was in their own staffing. So they sought grant money from the state of Washington's Foundational Public Health Program, not to pay for the software, but to use the money to add an FTE to the department. Later, it became 2 FTEs. These new hires had the express responsibility of backfilling and supporting those key persons who are key or important, who are going to be critical to configuring the new system. So in sum, when you budget and plan for your next system, accommodate a schedule and resources that will enable your staff to participate fully and to help quickly return to operations. We're going to talk later about the America Rescue Plan. Those are funds that we'll describe in a few slides. That I want you also to keep project staffing in mind when we get to that section. So to confirm this point, look at your budget and your project planning. Verify that your staff who already have daily responsibilities are not double booked on your next project. And this is tip number 4, budget for the total project impact. Now, I talk to a lot of health departments. I participate in a lot of demos, go to a lot of conferences, and I think it's time to rethink field inspection. In my opinion, keeping a paper checklist mentality is incompatible maybe with getting the most out of your field inspection software. First, I recommend you give the inspectors the tools that they need. To me, that means wireless connectivity where it's available, and I understand it's not in every case. Give them wireless connectivity. Second, give them the right device for the type of inspection you're asking them to do. By this, I mean that a pool inspection is perfectly suited for a smartphone. Lots of pictures, just mark only violations, relatively little narrative, and probably no printed report. And a phone is already going to have connectivity through its data plan. We're good. But a restaurant inspection might benefit from a laptop with a full keyboard, or maybe an iPad with a collapsible keyboard. So I suggest open your minds, check with your programs. There should be different devices for different types of inspections, and I don't think we've all thought about it that way before today. For another matter, it's time to emphasize photos in order to maximize, to minimize the requirement for narrative and maximize what you're communicating. So as you probably know, in previous days, you may have worried about the space requirements for having a lot of pictures, but that constraint is essentially gone. Take pictures. Include the pictures in the inspection report if you're willing to do that. Speech to text is another very helpful option. It helps inspectors, at least those that are in a quiet place, such as in the pool program, capture their narrative very quickly. iOS devices have Siri, which we all know how to use, and it's improving all the time. For many of us, it's faster than typing. When rethinking field inspections, it's not just about the tools the inspectors need, but how technology can help inspectors get more coverage. I've seen situations where you might have one inspector assigned to 1,000 or more facilities. That's a lot to cover within the course of a year, including re-inspections. Data analytics should be used to prioritize those inspections and manage those resources, again, where your delegation agreements and practices allow it, to get the most coverage and focus on the most critical facilities first.
And this could also lead to other creative ways to solve the volume increase in staffing shortages, such as virtual inspections for non-critical inspections or re-inspections. During the pandemic, health departments began conducting virtual restaurant inspections where restaurant managers would walk the inspectors through their facility while they're connected by video. Although they do have some limitations, inspectors were able to observe things like an operator doing a temperature check for food, refrigeration and warming units, also checks for sanitation concentrations, proper glove usage, and cleanliness of food contact surfaces. So while in-person inspections are best for some things, the time savings of virtual inspections has been realized. And the numbers show that an inspector can perform 3 times more inspections virtually than in person. And agencies are now reimagining how they can take advantage of these cost savings going forward.
It makes sense that the future needs to be different, will be different. So this is our tip number 5. Rethink how you approach field inspection. To confirm this, require that your proposed solution solve for iOS, Android, and Windows, and you're making the most of literally every device.
So, what is an aspirational project? It's really something that's out of the norm, maybe something that boosts morale and gets the blood pumping. It might be pursuing the FDA's voluntary program standards and the associated grants that come with that. It might be placarding, scoring, or grading. It might be submitting for the Crumbine Award. It could mean having flexibility in light of what might happen, like a pandemic or a natural disaster or an unfunded mandate. It could mean proactively preparing for these situations. It might be a unique program that assures that underrepresented operators get what they need to be successful. So in your requirements, ask yourself, what is that aspirational project? And what do I need to do to put that in my 3-year plan? To confirm this, flag, even if it's just for internal documentation, which requirements support that aspirational project. This is tip number 6, plan for special aspirational projects.
I love that tip because it keeps things exciting. I promised a slide on stimulus dollars. Federal stimulus dollars to your city, county, or district came in 2021, and then a second batch came in 2022, just this last summer. The American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, made it certain that literally every municipality and health district got granted funds. And the purpose of these funds, the requirements for spending these funds are vague. And that's what Congress wanted. They wanted locals to have the flexibility. I want to assure you that your environmental health data management project is directly eligible for ARPA funding. We know from experience that not every department has line of sight to these funds. After all, the Treasury guidelines, they don't use the word environmental health or software, but the guidelines do talk about protecting the public's health, replacing lost revenue, enabling underrepresented communities, and most importantly, preparedness for the next emergency. In 2020, that meant a lot of work from home, a digital front counter, flexibility to revise, rethink, and replan. Even if you don't get that line of sight, there are other ways to think about stimulus dollars entering your city, county, or district. For one, when ARPA funds flow into your state, county, city, district, it can free up budgets for other projects. It also sets you up for getting extra help in the office, like the Tacoma example earlier. That makes your project even more attractive. In any case, one thing is true. If you're ready to make a project happen, we're not going to see funding opportunities like this again in our careers. So I say, don't let this moment pass you by. And one last thing, sometimes your IT department just needs a clear signal from you of your project's urgency. That could come from an end-of-life signal from your existing system. For example, Tyler asking digital health department customers to move off that platform, or it could come from an underlying technology change, like when Microsoft retired Internet Explorer. I think that got all of our attention. So think or ask what your IT department needs from you in order to prioritize your project. This is tip number 7. Tap into non-traditional once-in-a-lifetime funding. And to confirm this, make and document an outreach to your budget officer, you know the right person, but to validate what is and is not available for your project, not just in software, but in services, hardware, and additional help. And I'm going to paste a link into the chat that tracks ARPA project spending throughout the US. It's pretty good inspiration. Turns out that we squeezed in a bonus tip, tip number 8. If your agency must use an RFP, a request for proposal, then you're entering into a regimented relationship where communications, unfortunately, sometimes have to be truncated. The rules, I understand, can be very strict. In this situation, I suggest you do yourself a favor as you consider your written requirements. That is, be specific. Take the extra time to be explicit, especially where your requirements, your aspirational projects, will require unique capabilities. Interacting with third parties, those vendors that aren't part of the project, such as your stage health department, is one type of that risk. I'll give you an example from an actual RFP. Here's a requirement. The requirement reads, integrate with other applications such as, and then it goes on to list county's time card system, California Environmental Reporting System, solid waste information, GeoTracker, and be able and it goes on and on. When a requirement reads must interface with county's time card system, the proposer, whoever is making proposals, is left to imagine what that entails. And yes, I acknowledge there's often a Q&A cycle, but in my experience, there's only one round of Q&A and responses from the health department, the county, typically terse, not fully explored. So what technical methods will be used? What data will be exchanged? On what frequency? Is the interchange stable, or should vendors expect the state to twist and tweak the requirements? Why do I say it this way? Because when you lack the details that only you can produce, the proposers, they'll assume the worst. They'll assume the worst sort of troublesome relationship, and that in turn adds to the cost of your project. So what you can do is assure the vendor that both parties in that data exchange are on board, that the transactions that are going to go back and forth are really well known, that the frequency is reasonable. By the way, real time versus once a month are two totally different things in terms of risk and complexity. So I would break it down this way. Two-way interfaces are more complex than one-way interfaces. Real-time interfaces are much more complex than daily or weekly interfaces. And undocumented requirements, just trust us, we'll figure it out through the course of the project, that always comes across as very risky. And I suggest you avoid that if you can. So this was our tip number 8, know when and where to be prescriptive. And to confirm this, ask a technical resource, somebody who would normally be able to implement what's being suggested, like an IT department, trusted advisor. Ask them to read that section of the RFP and say whether they could estimate that amount of work. And if there's not enough information to estimate the work, then there's not enough information to get a reliable proposal.
All right, so here we are. Let's review, and then I think we'll have time left over for some questions. So number 1, please don't try to recreate your old system. Require a solution that will work for 10 or 20 years. Number 2, in that same vein, shift resources from IT to the cloud and to that vendor to ensure your system is always up to date. It also makes technical support easier too. Number 3, insist that your next, more modern solution exchange data, workflow, and tasks with the other departments. You shouldn't have to log out and log in to multiple systems. Number 4, as leaders in your organization, it's important to the success of your project to budget for time spent away from your day-to-day tasks. Have that time covered by other resources where possible. Number 5, field inspections. Take advantage of the wireless internet where it's available. Rely on photos and other features of the phone. Do not try to recreate that FDA checklist. Those templates were not designed with modern tech in mind. Number 6, look to your next horizon and just a little bit beyond. In doing so, you'll have an easier time justifying the project and find there's more enthusiasm for tackling the project when there's really something cool in there, something really aspirational on the other side. Number 7, do not let this once-in-a-lifetime moment pass you by. These funds exist, and there are ways to get the benefit, but you might have to be a little persistent. And number 8, finally, in our bonus section, don't leave the details for later. When the requirement is not familiar to your reader, taking time here can save lots of time and money and frustration.
Thank you, Amber. I think that's a pretty good list. I see I should have been advancing it all along. I wanted to make one point of clarification when we referenced the FDA checklist. We realize that you're bound to use Cal Code or FDA or your state food code, and we don't make that suggestion with the idea that you shouldn't follow what you're obligated to follow. Of course you need to, and you will, and your inspectors have marking guides that are instructive and critical to that process. I think what we're saying is don't try to make it look pixel for pixel on the screen exactly the way we find it in the annex of the food code, because that was presented for a paper presentation and we're talking about a digital presentation. So Amber, I want to thank you and our colleagues that are on the line. You have with you now several experts who see and respond to feels like hundreds of RFPs each year. This is a moment for you to ask some questions by chat. And then I think we had some questions that were sent in before, Amber.
Yeah, I think probably the most common questions that we get when we do a presentation, which is, yes, the PowerPoint and the recording will be made available to those who register. So those details will follow.
That's true. We're often asked also for, could we get maybe an example of what a set of requirements would be for a health department of our size or our type? And we have those libraries, and you can reach out to me or through Excella, and we have examples. Also be aware that NEHA, the National Environmental Health Association, has established a repository of previously issued RFPs. And then we have some model RFPs. So it saves you the time of writing out each of the questions, each of the requirements and setting up the matrix and all that kind of stuff. That time could be better spent thinking about your programs and following these tips. I also have a question here, and maybe Amber, you can answer this one. It's just like, in general, what happens when you want to change something? So let's just say the city, county, or state adopt a system, everything looks great, but then 6 months later, there's a fee change or there's a new checklist item. Like, what should be expected? What's reasonable with all the systems that are out there today?
Well, that's a good point. I'd assume that some of those things you mentioned were table stakes, but whatever system you consider, it should be highly configurable. We know that things like checklists and standard comments, the fees that you mentioned, all of this can change, reports can change. So as a part of your early training and as a part of the documentation that you would receive, you should be able to add things like custom fields or checklist items, or update those regular reports by yourself. It should be self-service.
So if you don't see that as table stakes, you could make that a requirement, right? You just add that to your requirements, that you'd be able to do that kind of stuff and that be part of your training. I have one here that I think probably is best suited for me. The question reads, what if we don't have internet connectivity where we work? Our OSS program, which is on-site septic, is mostly out in the country where there's no coverage or it's spotty. Okay, so this is something that is asked in almost every demo. So we're pretty familiar with the question and the answer. And I think it is also table stakes, or should be acknowledged, that every inspector, just like everybody who carries a cell phone, will be out of coverage sometimes, some of the day. Could be in a McDonald's basement, or could be at a project site. And we agree that inspectors must be able to complete their work while disconnected, especially in a septic program. Our point, however, is that you make the job easier if you don't compel the inspectors to return to the office to get their synchronization done. That is kind of old school thinking. If they're going to have some coverage some of the time, then you make offline use a requirement, of course, and that should be all systems nowadays. And you get their work done. But in periods where they are in coverage, you're going to take a lunch break, or whatever it is as they drive from one appointment to the next. And we take advantage of that internet connectivity in order to, as quickly as possible, get that data to the cloud. And getting that data to the cloud has lots of benefits. One is now it's secure. You don't have to worry about any type of failure on the part of the device. There's actually a safety issue. We just started tracking GPS locations of inspections as they're done, so you could conceivably trace where an inspector has been, their last appointment, and so forth. There's lots of good reasons to push that data up to the cloud. Not to mention, in most configurations now, we're generating the inspection report electronically and transmitting it to the contractor, the requester, the operator. And so again, earlier you get coverage, the sooner you have that inspection going out again. So I have another question that is probably better for you, Amber, because you talked about cloud and software as a service. This question reads, if I move to the cloud, what kind of insights are available to me?
Well, that's a great question. First, for Excella, we're putting a lot of our weight and investment into the cloud. So that's where you're going to see all the new features appear first. One of those newer and highly desirable features is our dashboarding tool. We call that Excella Insights. And for those of you that have heard of Microsoft Power BI, that's actually what it's built on. It's built on that platform. And it's right in the browser. So those dashboards, like your Monday morning reports, they can really set the team's direction for the entire day or week. And those are all available at your fingertips.
And that Power BI is a great example because over working many years with the Decade customers, I know many of them embraced Power BI at the county level and then started tapping into their Envision Connect data. And that was cool. That's what it's for, and it does a great job at it. I think the difference here is that we're pushing those into the product. That's a modern approach. And so your users don't have to log out of A and log into B. They don't have to switch to another screen or anything like that. That can just be the first screen they see, their dashboard, for example, when they log in the morning. I'm going to ask you to tackle this next one, and I might have something to add, Amber. It says we're having difficulty hiring resources to manage our on-prem solution. Talk about the resources that are needed if it's a cloud solution.
Well, we get this question a lot. That's a very common problem. Now, when you're moving to the cloud, you no longer need to manage that infrastructure for an on-prem solution. So you really don't need to focus on hiring those highly technical resources. And you can focus on less technical resources, even folks that you might have in-house to support and maintain and innovate your solution on the platform. So some examples you could consider would be report writers. So as we talked, reports can change. You might want to add that expertise on board. We've seen agencies add data scientists. So those dashboards we're talking about, some of those insights are available out of the box. You can modify them, but sometimes you might want to dig deeper and look at data across multiple departments or agencies, overlay them on top, of each other to really get those better detailed insights. And then I think most importantly, it's really the business folks. In many cases, these could be your problem solvers or your super users that you have that can translate the business requirements into solutions with the different configuration options. So, as I mentioned earlier, a good cloud solution is very much self-service. And with a little training, you can really give the keys over to those business folks who are closest to the problems and needs to be able to support and evolve the solution over time.
Yeah, and this is a very real issue. I've talked to a number of EH directors about this. And so how you recruit, I think, has a lot to do with this. If you recruit for, a cloud solution with APIs and Power BI interfaces and low code, no code, use some of these catchphrases, then you're likely to sweep in more candidates, I think, who are excited about that at that phase in their career. And then I think, as Amber explained, you also have power users within the department who don't need to have a computer science degree, who don't need to have deep training in any particular technology, but can use a drag and drop type interface to maybe change workflow, maybe set up a dashboard, maybe tweak fees. I have a couple other questions that came in through chat. So thank you, Josh. Josh asks, are the EH product demonstrations available anywhere? I just finished recording kind of an intro to Excella environmental health, which is short. It's 8 to 10 minutes on purpose so that you can get a taste of what the user interface looks like. And so that'll be published to our web environmental health page soon, Josh. But if you just want to hit me directly, I can send you a link where it's stored today. And then he also asked, will environmental health demos be available at Accelerate? And yes, at Accelerate, which by the way is our annual user conference coming up in just 2 weeks, we have a whole room dedicated to the experience of Excella. In fact, I think it's called the Experience Center. And there we'll have various kiosks, one of which will be set up to do demos on any of the products that we offer, including environmental health. So that will be there. Then Elena asks, can you share more about how to secure ARPA funding? So Elena, thank you for the question. This is near and dear to my heart as I've been kind of rattling the cages and trying to get people to pay attention to this. Here's what I have learned. Even though the projects are without question eligible for ARPA funding in your county, I'm just going to assume you work with a county, but same goes for cities and states and districts. Even though we know that is fundamentally true, you probably have gatekeepers. Maybe it's at the elected official level, your board of supervisors or similar. Maybe it's with the department heads who are kind of making some decisions already and maybe out in advance of environmental health. I even had one situation where we talked it all the way through and the person, the health department representative, went to the budget officer and the budget officer said, nope, that is not allowed because that is software as a service. Software as a service is not allowed, which is just fundamentally wrong. Bless that person. I'm sure they were doing their very best to understand all the confusing guidance that came down from the Treasury, but they just didn't understand. And another example I found where the boards of supervisors set kind of wide expectations on how they wanted the funds to be spent. And of course, they're trying to address homelessness. They're trying to address public health crises. They're trying to address lots of things. But usually in there is room for environmental health projects, other IT projects, especially if they're on the backlog. And here's the tip. Maybe this is the bonus tip. Hit Google or hit your intranet and just Google the name of your county and then ARPA, ARPI plan. And you can fool around with a couple of variations, but by now, any city, county, state worth its salt has declared a plan. And in that plan, you'll be able to flip through the pages if it's a PowerPoint, and you'll be able to see readily what the plan is. And just because the plan doesn't say environmental health or hazmat data management, that doesn't mean you're not included in the plan. It just means that you weren't at that level of detail. So you find out who published the plan, you find out who approved the plan, you go to that person or panel and you talk to them, because sure as we're sitting here, one or more of the things that are earmarked for that money are going to fall through. The vendor's not going to be able to step up. Someone's going to quit or resign. Something's going to happen, and they're looking for a shovel-ready project to fill it in. Because if they don't spend that money by 2024, it's gone. And I'm not an elected official, but I'll tell you what, I don't want to have to answer to anybody for why I had hundreds of thousands, millions, in some cases, tens of millions and more come through my hands and not actually be applied for the benefit of my constituency, for the benefit of my community. So that's a great question to end on, Elena. Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the interface there. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to thank you, Amber. Amber, we've been working together for over 7 years now. Can you believe it?
I can't.
Yeah.
Where'd the time go?
Went in the snap of a finger. And to thank you all for being with us here today. Of course, we'll use a follow-up email to make sure you have access to the recording and the PowerPoint and those types of follow-up activities. My email is dbooth@excella.com if you need to reach out to me. And I'll just say thank you. I hope you have a fantastic week.